Hello everybody, welcome to Wellness. I am Dr. Olivia Joseph with Dr.
Anthony Pasek. Hey,
and we run the functional medicine clinical team here at the Wellness Connection. So we're going to talk about something that affects more people now than ever before in history.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like cardiovascular disease, cancer, obesity, childhood obesity. It's one of those things where the rates just keep going this way. No matter how much modern medicine we have, no matter how much testing we have, we're not really succeeding when it comes to autoimmunity. This is something that we get a lot of questions on. So I was just talking with Dr. Anthony, and he's like, how are we only supposed to talk on autoimmunity for like 15, 20 minutes when we have talked, we've done hours and hours on summits, docu-series, talking with patients, talking with other functional medicine practitioners, talking at workshops. So we're not going to talk about every autoimmune disease under the sun. We're going to talk about autoimmunity, what it is, risk factors, prevention, genetic predisposition, what are the most common ones that we see. So let's get started.
Right.
So what is autoimmunity, or what is autoimmune disease?
I always tell patients autoimmunity is mistaken identity.
That's well said.
So your immune system really has one job. It's supposed to take something that's floating around in your bloodstream like a virus or a bacteria or something, and it's supposed to grab it and attack it and destroy it because it's not recognized as you, like part of me as an individual. So that's your immune system's primary job. When it gets confused for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about, your immune system starts to turn on a body part like your thyroid, and it says, oh, this body part's not mine. I'm going to attack it and kill it and destroy it. Just like when you get an organ transplant, you always have to take immune suppression medication because your immune system says, oh, that's Bob's liver, that's not mine. We need to kill it and destroy it. But you don't want that to happen to your own body part. That's autoimmunity.
Exactly. Well said. So I think some people think that, oh, but I never get sick, or do I have low immune function? It's an immune system that is angry, irritated, and agitated. So we're going to talk about things that can really tick off your immune system and turn autoimmunity on. So let's talk about autoimmunity being genetic. So what comes to mind is, or something that I want you guys to know, is if you have a family history of autoimmune disease, it does not mean you will get that autoimmune disease, right? You may or may not be a genetic carrier, but you'll have something in your family history. So let's just kind of shoot off autoimmune diseases. Most common one, Hashimoto's. We see that more commonly than any other autoimmune disease. It's so prevalent that we test for it on our baseline blood work. What you need to know about that is when you have Hashimoto's, your risk for other autoimmune disease is higher. That's true for all autoimmune disease. But if somebody comes in with like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, we're also going to test for Hashimoto's. So what are some other autoimmune disease that I didn't mention right there?
MS, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, eczema,
psoriatic arthritis.
Certainly the big ones like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease.
I forgot about those. Those are big ones.
Celiac disease. There's a few different names, but your liver.
Sjogren's is considered an autoimmune disease. Fibromyalgia's got a question mark next to it.
Here's how I think of it. If you just imagine a body part, there's an autoimmune disease that can attack it.
So, skin. Joints. Colon.
Brain.
Thyroid.
Pancreas. Liver.
So,
reproductive organs, that can be a cause of infertility for some people.
So, your genes don't determine your destiny. So if you have a genetic predisposition, if you're carrying a gene for autoimmunity, it does not mean that in your lifetime it will turn on. So what are some things that turn autoimmune disease on?
One of my favorite mentors in this field, I don't know if he made this up, but he says it all the time. Genes load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. So anything in your environment, and your environment can really be defined as anything that's not your genetics. So that's crazy.
So that could be environmental toxins.
Your food choices. The microbes in your gut.
Medication can turn it on.
Stress in your life.
Another illness. So we've seen people get an infection, viral, bacterial, that triggers this and turns it on. So something's got to turn it on. Something's got to aggravate it. And those are some of the things that, we covered.
The third component then, you've got the genetic predisposition. If you imagine like a Venn diagram, some type of environmental trigger, you have to have some kind of barrier breakdown. So the gut,
I was literally about to say that.
the gut or the skin or the lungs or things
Okay.
like that. So getting a tattoo, having a leaky gut.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Well, we're on the same
So
page.
I was going to say, so when you have a leaky gut,
Yeah.
your risk for autoimmunity is way higher.
Yeah.
When you have an autoimmune disease and leaky gut, your risk for developing more autoimmune disease way higher. So this is where I believe we can focus on things preventively. So if I was to say, if you were wanting to prevent another autoimmune disease, if you wanted to get your autoimmune disease into remission, if you wanted to prevent autoimmune disease from turning on, how would you do that? You work on the mucosal membrane of your gut. That's probably where you're going to get the most bang for your buck.
Yep.
So let's give people some tips on what that might look like. So one thing I would say diet-wise, what comes to mind? If you didn't want to turn on autoimmune disease,
everybody
what food
say it
would you
together.
avoid?
Gluten.
Yeah. There's so much research on gluten.
I don't know if we've talked about this one, but within the last year, that study that said if you're a human and you consume gluten, you're going to have a leaky gut. And it's more of like a fever, like a passive response.
Yeah.
Not a passive. It's a transient thing.
Yep.
It's not like a state like you're on or off. But if you eat gluten, you're going to get leaky gut. So it's like, do you want that? Yes or no? If you're a human, you're going to get it.
We know gluten disrupts immune function. Right. There's no doubt about it. Like, there's so much science and research. So if you get geeked about science and research like we do, I mean, tons and tons of studies. So if you're genetically predisposed, or I mean, it impacts your immune function no matter what. Right. But from a preventive tool, that's one of the best things you could do. You could find out what's going on with the environment of your gut. And how do we do that? We do that through stool analysis.
Right.
We do food sensitivity testing too, so we can see what other foods create inflammation in the gut. Because when you have chronic inflammation in the gut, it can lead to leaky gut as well. Leaky gut is formed from infections, food allergies, autoimmune predisposition. So it's
trauma, like concussion, stress.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you talk about concussion, that's one of those things when you talk about a barrier.
Yeah. When
you have a concussion, the gut-brain barrier is open, and you do not want your brain barrier open. That is chronic issues long-term. Worse than gut issues,
that
honestly.
CTE, the punch drunk used to call it, but all those football players with multiple concussions and stuff, that chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That's bad news.
Bad news.
So that's early dementia, and it can be
a lot of
hard
other
to
things.
recover from.
Yeah.
Another area, can I jump in?
Yeah.
To help prevent that is to get a good microbiome. So lots of fermented foods, lots of fibers from plants. Has to be the fiber from the plant, the variety of that.
I want to talk on fibers from plants, because I really think that when we meet with people clinically, they're clueless when we talk about plant fibers. So any vegetable is going to have plant fibers, but what are some of the ones that really have a positive impact on the gut?
Sure. There's a group called resistant starch that's pretty helpful.
Exactly what I want to talk about. Yeah.
So that's a lot of foods that we don't eat in Western culture.
Nope.
But a lot of other cultures do. So green banana flour is used a lot in Asian and Indian.
Or green bananas.
Or raw plantains.
Raw plantains.
Taking foods like rice and potatoes, which we sometimes say are no, but if you cook them and let them cool for 24 hours and then don't reheat them, that converts the carbohydrates into a different starch, and then they feed your gut.
So another thing too, for people who aren't eating grains at all, or who are on really low carbohydrate diets, what we'll have them do is we'll have them take like potato starch, mix it in water or in a shake and drink it. Very good way. And then there's the fermented foods, the kimchi, sauerkraut, pickles, kombucha, that kind of circles back. So keeping your gut healthy. One nutrient that is very healing to the mucosal membrane of the intestines is L-glutamine. It's got to be in a powder form. Taking it in a pill form isn't going to hit as many parts of the digestive tract. We like to use it in combination sometimes with colostrum, with deglycerized licorice, with aloe. Now that doesn't mean that everybody should go on L-glutamine to prevent leaky gut. That's not how we approach it. We give it to people who need it. We give colostrum to people who need it, but colostrum is a phenomenal source for people with autoimmunity. Do you want to touch on why that might be?
Well, colostrum's almost like antibodies in a jar. Like they basically help to bind onto pathogens and stuff in your gut,
which could be what triggered it in the first place. Yeah.
We also use I don't say the brand name. I don't know what they call it, but the other powder that we use, that can bind onto that stuff too. So it's almost like a supplemental immune system. You know, it helps your body to it helps them to grab onto stuff, undigested food and microbes and stuff in the gut, and then pass it on to
viruses too.
Right.
Yep. So we see we check immune function when we check stool analysis with like secretory IgA. So let's talk about testing. I don't think the testing that's conventional for autoimmune is that good. I really don't, because you've got to do what like a go fish test. So one of the most common ones is an ANA, right? But the problem is you can have an autoimmune disease brewing and have a negative ANA.
Yep.
You could have an autoimmune disease and have a negative ANA. You can end up ANA positive and you don't know what freaking autoimmune disease you have. So you've got to really go in and check for specific markers. And how do you know what to order? You really have to do it by symptoms, which is never a good way to practice healthcare, right? You have to go on symptoms, and then you have to start running specific autoimmune markers for that. So, I'm working with somebody, and they have a family history of rheumatoid arthritis, and they're having symptoms consistent with rheumatoid arthritis. Yeah, I'm going to run an ANA, rheumatoid factor, and some other markers that are more specific to rheumatoid arthritis. But that doesn't mean that so if it all comes back negative, it doesn't mean they don't have an autoimmune disease.
Right.
So what do you think of as far as testing? Is there something that you think you would guide people towards?
I'm a big testing nerd, of course, but then there's just always the gut instinct and experience that you can lean on. Like if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and all the things are pointing toward, this is probably autoimmunity, I will often settle on, let's approach it like this is autoimmunity.
Right.
And we might not ever have that number on a piece of paper that we can point
to. And you don't want that. The goal is prevention. The goal is prevention. And that's where I think some other markers help us guide people towards better immune health. And some of those markers are vitamin D levels, major player in immune function. Some of those markers are inflammation. Yeah, people with autoimmunity are going to have higher levels of inflammation. So when we see inflammation off the charts, we're going to work on diet, lifestyle, gut, things of that nature. Because when we can improve vitamin D, reduce inflammation, that's a big component in never manifesting anything autoimmune. But on a CBC, what are some things you see on a CBC? So you guys get CBCs every time you have blood work. Every doctor under the sun runs them. And having your numbers in normal range means nothing. Most people are in normal range, even people with like bad disease. You could have cancer and have a normal CBC. You could have so much going wrong. So what are some of the things that we look at on a CBC? Go get your labs out. We don't have to talk numbers specifically, but what markers on a CBC do we look at functionally to get a better picture of immune health?
Yeah, autoimmunity can look kind of like a chronic viral infection sometimes. They kind of mimic each other a little bit. So, the total white blood cell count is important to look at.
Yeah, we like that 6 or higher. Yeah.
And then of the types of white blood cells, the neutrophils and the lymphocytes, sometimes it's just N or L. You want to look at what those numbers are in proportion to each other.
You want them in a 2-to-1 ratio. You want your neutrophils to be twice as high as your lymphocytes. When those numbers are flip-flopped, you have a chronic viral infection. I don't know what it is, but you've got a virus that should be sleeping. Viruses don't leave your body. That's not how the immune system works. But you do not want them to be running your body and running your immune system, because they can attach to healthy tissue, just like an autoimmune disease, and start breaking down that healthy tissue and causing symptoms. So neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, white blood cell count. What are your thoughts on eosinophils?
Well, usually they're high when people have allergy type stuff.
And parasites.
Interestingly, I'm seeing fewer parasites now.
I am too. I really am. I think we used to, not us, a lot of people on the functional side call everything a parasite. It's that's not really.
Just another weird thought on that. This old friend's hypothesis. They use certain parasites as to get people in remission for autoimmunity in the gut. So it's like, well,
we're all
really the
exposed
enemy,
to parasites, right? They're not all bad. I know.
It's useful to look at, but you got to correlate it with what's going on.
Agreed.
So, monocytes being high as well.
I was going to say that too.
Sometimes see that in food sensitivities or
Epstein-Barr virus.
Right.
So some really, really, really Common viruses are herpes viruses. So let's cover some of the viruses in the herpes family. So chickenpox we don't see as much of. Shingles, Epstein-Barr virus. 90% of people are exposed to Epstein-Barr virus, have Epstein-Barr virus antibodies, and it never turns into mono. If you have had mono, unfortunately, your immune system is not going to be as effective long-term without some immune support. So you could think of cold sores. You could think of, I haven't seen HPV, which is in that family. I haven't seen that show up on neutrophil to lymphocytes. Anything that I missed?
Those are really the big ones. It's been a while since I've looked at that whole chart. But
so what's the main amino acid that helps suppress herpes virus?
Lysine.
Lysine.
It's free. It's basically free. It's like dirt cheap, you know.
It is, and it's not. It's one of those supplements where it's hard to run into bad quality. We can't say that about a lot of things, but that's one of those. So I want you to understand about an amino acid. They're essentially considered essential amino acids. Your body does not make them. You have to get them from food or from supplementation. So what food sources are richest in amino acids?
Protein.
Animal protein. So if you're a vegetarian, if you're a vegan, if you have a plant-based diet, you may not be getting enough amino acids. Now you can take amino acid supplementation if you're a vegetarian or a vegan and it doesn't necessarily come from an animal, but don't think that it's something that your own body makes. Using amino acids is very, very supportive in some people. Good for anti-aging, muscle production, suppression of viruses. Just to name a few. So that's all things autoimmune without us going specifically into individual autoimmune diseases. Dr. Anthony and myself, we will be creating content on Hashimoto's, on thyroid health, on hormone health, on gut health, on leaky gut. We're going to be doing all of that for you. If you have questions a little bit more specific to certain autoimmune diseases and it strikes up a conversation, we will create a video on it, but that's some of what's to come. With the foundation that we built, talking about immune health, talking about inflammation, gut health, there's so much to go off. We are not going to fall short of content, but when you guys put comments and questions in, it helps us to create content that's applicable to you. So if you guys want more content, put what you'd like to see more of, and we're happy to do that for you. So take care, post your questions, your comments, share this with your friends and family members suffering with autoimmune disease, and we have a lot of stuff out there that can get more specific into each individual one. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.